This is Forrest Lowe talking about whole disk copy scheme. Thanks, Forrest.
I'm going to start with Admiral Stockdale's opening lines from his vice presidential debate. Who am I and what am I doing here? Well, I'm Forrest Lowe. I've been doing computers since 1972. And what I'm doing here is having a good time. In the course of my first 10 years of programming and whatnot, I learned by the hard way the value of backups. When the Apple came out, and I finally got one. Hang on a second here, how do we change the... there we go. And I finally got one. I wanted to back up the software I bought so that I wouldn't accidentally destroy it, as I had some other things. And I was looking for a copy solution, and the first couple things I bought, the copy that came with DOS worked just beautifully. And then I got a copy protected program. And I got, what? How do we do this? And I eventually got it copied, and I ended up getting into that loop that people like to see. You know, this one. Only I saw it from a different point of view. I saw it from this point. Buy new software. It costs money. Can I copy it? Oh, no. Go find a copy protection breaking program to copy it. Did it work? No. Find another one. Eventually you get one copy, you make the copy, and you're off and running. That's a lot of money back then. $150 for a utility program, up to $200 for a productivity program, which is mostly what I was into, or $20 to $30 per game. Multiply it by about 2 to get our current prices. And it was expensive. And I wasn't the only one apparently who had it, because in 1985 or so, I read an article about a technique proposed to copy disks using a laundry iron. Sounds sort of weird. Thought about it. I've got a degree in chemistry and I know physics, etc. And I thought, that's good. Technically it's possible, but it probably won't work. If the article had given the name of who was involved with it that I later heard, I would have probably remembered it, but I forgot it until I ran into it again, a reference to it, in 2011, 12, 13. The articles chain, I was trying to find out something about an update to Locksmith, and I ran into the Who Wrote Locksmith trail on the web, and eventually I found Robert Cridgley's blog about white iPhones, which has a big aside about how he was proposing, or somebody was proposing, that Wozniak had actually been the author of Locksmith. But it mentions that Wozniak, in order to defeat a protection scheme that he had done to get better than the previous protection scheme, using a flat iron. And it has some logical reasons it might work, and it's the Critchley attributed it to Andy Hertzfeld, so there was some credibility to that. Getting ahead of myself, I think. Anyway, in that write-up, there was a reference to a previously existing device, which was used in 1950s and 60s television for copying advertising videotapes. Videotapes back then were 2-inch wide tapes that were written with a head that rotated at a bazillion cycles per second, I don't know what. The tape ran under it at 15 inches a second. And it wore out those heads real fast. They're expensive. to make copies of ads and custom ads for various different stations, they had to find a way to make the copies cheaper. And what they did was they came up with a different device. Now, before I get into that exactly, I will go to the physics involved. And this is not the latest version of my thing. I read a whole bunch last night, more on it. Magnetic materials have what is called a Curie temperature, which is comparable for magnetics to boiling temperatures for liquids. They also have a susceptibility to being magnetized, a coercive property that is how much it takes to get it to do it and how sensitive it is. If you've ever used audio tapes, you know that there's the high resolution chromium dioxide tapes and there's the normal iron oxide ones. Well, the chromium dioxide ones have certain really good features, like to get real fine resolution particle size, so you can get high frequency sounds very clearly and so forth. The iron oxide, not so much. And the bad point is that the chromium dioxide is real sensitive to picking up magnetic fields. So you really couldn't have a double-sided, like a floppy disk. You could have a double-sided floppy disk that way. Because when you went to write on one side, it got right to both sides. Well, they use chromium dioxide on the television tapes because of that high resolution. And so when they made a copying device for it, I'm not an artist, basically they had a cold wheel that's 2 inches wide, metal, you ran the source tape that you're copying on, and they had a hot one that was above the Curie temperature that you ran the blank one on, and then they were pressed one on top of the other, and then transferring the copy to the cold wheel. It comes down below the Curie temperature, and then there's your copy. That works fine. There were some errors in the guy that described this on the web page, because he said you put it metal oxide to metal oxide, and you can't do that because when you're making the tape, your head is rotating, but it's leaving a diagonal stripe. So in order for it to work in the machines, they have to be the diagonal stripe in the correct direction. The concept of the iron would be the iron raises the blank disk to the Curie temperature. You flop on the original, you peel it off, it cools down, it copies the thing. Copies the magnetics. And that's a really nice idea if you can center it correctly, move it quickly enough that your original doesn't get demagnetized, and on and on and on. When I saw this was being attributed to Wozniak, I thought, well, okay, he's got a thing going for him. The biggest problem, if you can actually make the magnetic copy, first off, it's going to be single-sided. It has to be. Your original can be on 2 discs when you've copied it, but the second is, when you're copying it, you've got the 2 things like that, and as you peel it apart, you'll notice your magnetic striping are going to be going in the wrong direction. And he would be smart enough to either reverse the motor or something. I don't think this technique's ever going to really work. The other problem is the plastic it's on may melt below the Curie temperature. And whoever owned that iron is going to be real pissed. So I probably should have done this as a flash one, but that's what I've got. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, Joe Wright.
Yes.
I was wondering if you found an example of the tape transfer machine actually in use, or photograph of it or anything like that, other than just the description of how it worked?
I learned about it when I was working in Orange County in 1971, 2, and 3. So I knew it existed. But I was working for a computer manufacturer, and they were trying to figure out how they could copy 7-inch tapes using that technology. They never got it. But I thought I'd be able to find a photo. I wasted a lot of time looking for a photo of it on the web and never did. Any other questions? Well, actually, you could technically do that. Let's go back a second here. If you had a wide enough wheel and a thin enough backing tape that was made out of strong enough material that you could attach somehow your floppy disk to, and have one on each side, and then get them lined up adequately so that it's a machine is actually running it on, it's on a tape to make your copy. But you still have the other problems. And I suspect that the melting point of the plastic is going to be your biggest bugaboo. Anybody else? Well, thank you. Oh,
Just, you know, when we were talking about magnetic flux in an earlier presentation this week, and you know how that deteriorates when it's variable, how much of that magnetic flux amplitude would transfer? In other words, how much of it would be diminished in the copy?
depends upon how sensitive to the magnetic field swapping it is. I think that's the coercivity property. If it changes fast, you can get 100% copy. That's effectively what they do with the chromium dioxide. But if it's a real slow transfer, you're going to have to be taking that transition temperature down real slowly in order to get enough magnetic flux through. I don't think it's a viable technique. I'm biased. Well, thank you very much.